As we come back for segment 2 in this week's lesson on language, media, and the arts, I'm going to talk about the idea of emotional response, the idea of how does language create, if you will, an emotional response. There's this sense, and this is where, hopefully by taking this course and listening to the things that we talk about, I'm going to ruin you, that I'm going to make you aware of things that for most people, kind of just we pass over our heads, we don't even pay attention to, but that once you become attuned to this, you'll see quite how frequently words, images, and ideas are used. When people think about disability, the response that we get, and this is backed up by lots of polls, surveys and such, is that we have conflicting emotions. On the one hand, there's this sense of you're a person with a disability, you're out, we see this, that's so inspirational. Inspiration is a huge issue to overcome because you know what? Simply being out and about does not create somebody as inspirational. But the flip side of that is there's a great tendency for the non-disabled population, when thinking about disability, to think of someone with a disability in terms of pity. So what a contradiction that is if you think about it. On the one hand, inspiration, and on the other hand, pity. How do those things match? How do they work together? And the best that I can come up with on this is that there's a sense of inspiration of, oh, wow, look at that person. They're out, they're in public, this is great. But then there's that inside, that quiet voice that we don't talk about that says, but thank goodness that's not me. That's that pity part of it. And so if we have that kind of conflicting emotion, what's the likelihood that we're really ever going to be able to interact with that individual in any way that's as an equal? When we talk about this idea of disability being used to evoke emotions, I think that, again, one of the more common emotions that we see evoked is inspiration. And so I've got a couple of students here, a couple of speaker clips that I think you'll find valuable to hear how they think about being a, quote, inspiration to others.
If I say that I'm blind to someone, they'll be like, well, do you go anywhere? That's a question that I get a lot. Do you go anywhere? And considering I made it into this room today, it's obvious that I do travel. And that's something that people are wowed by. They're like, wow, that must be amazing. You're an awesome individual for being able to walk, blah, blah, blah. And blind people do travel. I think that not many people get that concept for some reason. There are people who have multiple disabilities on top of their blindness, but I've been to so many different places that it enhances my independence. And if I do go somewhere, I find it as an accomplishment. One of my pet peeves is if someone comes up to me and they are inspired by me. I occasionally get that, you're so inspirational for doing things on your own. It's just really exhausting to deal with. Like, hey, you're out here shopping. That's inspirational. It's something that I deal with constantly.
Within the media, as I've said, disability is used to evoke a number of different feelings. One of the ones that has really caused the most uproar, if you will, within the disability rights community is that depiction not only just of inspiration, but of disability as pity. So I'd also like to talk about the idea of telethons. And for any of you who may not be familiar with that, it's typically a TV program where you have a celebrity. We'll reference Jerry Lewis as a celebrity here in the United States, where they go on and they talk about the disability, have a variety of people come in, but more often than not, the telethons are designed to evoke pity because pity is a way of oftentimes generating money. Now, there may be other ways of doing it. My stepson, for example, is involved with an organization called Association for Individual Development, AID, and they have a yearly telethon, but their telethon is much more focused on introducing people who are receiving services, talking about what they're doing, how the programs are working, but not in any way designed to evoke pity. So when we think about this, we really want to look at telethons with a somewhat cautious view, because evoking pity, evoking negative images is absolutely opposite to what we're trying to accomplish. The most famous one certainly is the Muscular Dystrophy Association with Jerry Lewis, and that's one that's caused a lot of difficulty within the disability rights community, because what Jerry Lewis would do, and you've got some readings on this and would really strongly encourage you to check out the readings associated with today's lesson, is that he presented these really, really cute little children. who had muscular dystrophy and talked about how their lives have been robbed from them, how there's really no hope, but that you, as the generous viewer, could send money in and maybe we can find a cure, because without your donation, these children's lives are doomed. Now, that kind of appeal does get money, but think of the attitude it sets up with listeners, that you see this little child and, oh, he can't do anything, he's never going to be successful. What happens when he grows up? Because, all of us were much cuter when we were kids than when we were adults. And so we're not as cute as adults, and the telethon doesn't really focus on that. And as a group, there were a number of people in the disability rights community who said, hey, wait, don't portray us this way. And there's been, again, it's referenced in your reading, kind of an ongoing battle on this. One of the things that a clip will tell you if you look at it is a quote from Jerry Lewis. And he says, I'm telling people about a child in trouble. If it's pity, we'll get some money. I'm just giving you facts. He goes on to say, pity, if you don't want to be pitied because you're a cripple in a wheelchair, stay in your house. Okay? That's from CBS News 2001. So I mention this because telethons really do tend to create a very negative image, and one that from a media standpoint, language standpoint, is not one that we want to necessarily support. A telethon that showed the strengths and abilities and how we can build, certainly, but one that emphasizes the, quote, pitiful condition that people with disabilities experience, hard to find support for that. Fear is another area that emotions sometimes get encouraged. There was, in 2007, a campaign at the New York University Child Study Center, and it was called a ransom note campaign. And what they did, and you'll see some images that I will show here in just a moment, of notes that were either on billboards or were posted on telephone poles, but that were distributed within the area, that were designed to, A, catch people's attention and certainly recruit business, but from an attitudinal standpoint, a language standpoint, were very offensive for many of us. For example, one of the notes says, we are in possession of your son. We are making him squirm and fidget until he is a detriment to himself and those around him. Someday, your kid will pay. ADHD. Coming from a professional group, this is a kind of a scary thing to me. Another one, we are your son. We are stealing his ability for social interaction and will confine him to a life of complete isolation. It's all up to you. Asperger's syndrome. My favorite here as it relates to autism, we have your son. We will make sure he will not be able to care for himself or to interact socially for as long as he lives. This is only the beginning. Autism. I will tell you, as a father, as a parent, I find those kinds of statements very offensive. It's difficult to hear that as a way of talking about my son or the people that I've interacted with. So again, language has impact. So as we end this segment, there is just the point to be made. Remember that disability is used. I mean, it's consciously used to evoke emotions. And that then creates certainly a problem for people who have disability, because, if we're using your condition as something that is a negative, or it's don't be this, but be this instead, how does it feel to be that person? So pay attention to language, use it appropriately, and what we'll do now when we come back for the next segment is talk about some accessibility issues as related to language, media, and the arts.